But the thing about Berlin is that when you look into the history, right, especially the 20th century, all major events in the most recent history, Berlin was involved somehow, right? So let's take it first World War, Second World War, and the Berlin Wall, Cold War. So this city has been through a lot, and it has not built their own identity. So I would say they are less multicultural and cosmopolitan as those, and even London, right? But it's a city that is constantly trying to find their own identity. As you probably know, there is a large community here of people from Turkey, because at some point Germany needed to bring foreigners to kind of support the workforce demand. And there are discussions around how cultural adapted are those foreigners. So people say that there are the Berliners, there is the Berliners, the team Berlin and the team Germany, for example, right? So Berlin became very, very attractive for even Germans that wanted to have a cheaper life, like this 10 years ago. So attracted people from all over. And this kind of also brought some consequences. So like the real estate market just went all the way skyrocketing, and prices went up, and people were not happy with that. So you will find Berliners that they're not super happy with the foreigners, and even with people from other parts of Germany, because they say, hey, those people are paying way more for mortgages and they're bringing the prices up, for example, right? So there is this gentrification topic that it's under discussion. So you will find this balance between, and I think this creates a barrier as an identity, and being like very cosmopolitan as some countries are. So you can imagine a city that was divided by a wall. It takes a time for them to get unified, but every single tribe in Berlin will find their own space, right? So you have Brazilians doing samba rounds somewhere in Berlin. You will find Muslims having their own space for prayer, and so on and so forth, right? So I mean, as an European city, and as you know, Germany has also embraced this refugee crisis back 5 days ago, and it's doing a big effort. So I would say, from a political standpoint, it tried to create the right policies to make it easy for those who wants to integrate, right? But the question is always, have foreigners actually integrated to the German culture? So this is something we could discuss, right? But I mean, if you ask me, hey, is it good for a foreigner to live in Berlin? Yes, for sure. I mean, definitely, because I mean, you find people from different backgrounds. You learn how to. I mean, at the end of the day, you can learn from living in an international environment, right? But that also depends on where you work, where you live, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, yeah, no, true. Like you're speaking now, and I was just when I was there, I stayed in a hostel close to Potsdamer Platz or Alexanderplatz. I don't know, one of the two, which is obviously like very centrally located because I wanted to be close to the Brandenburg Gate and other touristic
Areas.
sites. But I remember it was all very organized, like the buses, the trains, the everything is super organized. Like there's a huge museum. I don't remember the name now, but it's just everything is just so beautiful. And so, we did a walking tour and it was just amazing. But I remember there was one guy interviewed here. I think his name is David. Yeah, David McNeil. He is from the US. He lives in Porto, Portugal now. But he told me that before moving to Porto, he spent, I think, about a year in Berlin. And he said in his interview that the people from Berlin are not very friendly and welcoming to foreigners. And he said, I'm not talking about the whole of Germany. I'm talking about my personal experience in Berlin with his wife. Would you agree with him?
Yeah, that's a good topic. I mean, people will say that Berliners are grumpy. Um, but then again, I think it connects with this thing, right? I mean, imagine you lived in a place divided by a wall, and you had two different administrations going on. I mean, that's crazy, right? I mean, it's not too long ago. That's 30 years ago. Um, so I can imagine that people are still learning, and there is this generation, and that will probably overcome. But I've worked with Berliners, with Rio Berliners, let's say, born and raised. They're pretty nice. I mean, they're just like, like us, I would say, right? But you will find like people in the how do you call it, in the supermarket, that they cannot tolerate waiting time. And that's something that it's really interesting about Germans. Like, if you look at people in the tills, they're just scanning things so fast because people get really annoyed when they're queuing. And you will probably come across a grumpy lady just pushing the trolley towards you so you can go faster with your shops. So this is something that you would probably kind of step upon when if you live in Berlin for more than 6 months. But I think I cannot blame them, because if you go to Sao Paulo, would you say people from Sao Paulo are friendly and nice to you as if you go to the countryside? I mean, this is a different thing, right? So big cities, they most of the time put this pressure on people, right? So it's the same with Parisians, right? So people who live in Paris. So I wouldn't blame them, to be fair, right? So I think there is this grumpiness going on. But I mean, it's not like in Brazil that we have the sun shining all year long, right? So I can understand. I'm always grumpy when the winter is coming and making the same complaints as everyone is doing, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so I can tell. I mean, I would agree to some extent. At the end of the day, that's my answer. So for students, right? So if you think about a student budget, as someone who comes to Berlin to live in a studio or share a flat, um, the German government requires that you have a student blocked account, right? And I think this is a good reference because they do that based on cost of living. So if you want to move to Germany as a student, the government will require you to have a blocked account that will release every month around 890 euros for you. So you need to have the full year, 12 months, let's say, saved in an official bank institution. So in a bank, official bank. And then this bank, which is authorized by the German government, is going to release this money every month to you. And this is roughly how much they require. So it's 900 euros, let's say it. And for a student, a single person, 900 euros should do, as you will probably have around 300, 400 with the rent. And then, the rest would be split across health insurance, food, and transportation. But that also depends on the kind of life you have, right? I mean, personally, I came with my wife and my daughter, and our budget, I would say, it's roughly double this, let's say, budget, right? So um, for a family, depending on the neighborhood, you will pay around, for a family like 3 rooms apartment, you will pay around 1,000 euro, 1,200. And again, depends on how old is the apartment, which neighborhood is in. And roughly with food, I mean, we spend around 300 euros, 400 euros if it's a month where we're, eating a bit more outside. So I have a very simple life. So we're not in restaurants all the time, but we like to cook our own food. But we also have like very, it's not for sophisticated tastes, right? So that's also okay. And transportation, like in Berlin, you can go around with a bicycle anywhere, which kind of helps students avoiding this transportation cost. But if you say, hey, I would love to have a monthly ticket, that would cost around 80 euros, if I'm not mistaken. And that would give you like, access to most of the, models, from trams to the subways and so on. So again, for a student, 900 euros a month would be a good budget to look out for. And then you're not gonna live on a very nice studio, living on your own, right? So because there are student studios that can cost up to 700, 800. So I had colleagues from my master's degree that they were living in like very decent, I would say, pretty decent studios, that you could have all the infrastructure for laundry, for studying. It was like a student hall, in like as you may find in other countries. But since Berlin doesn't have this, like if you go to the UK, you will find like this different student hall that is owned by the universities. It's not the case here in Berlin. So there are some private student places that you probably will rent around this price. So I mean, roughly, this is what you will spend. But there is a lot of good information in the internet, on the internet, and decent blogs with those numbers updated. I can also share that with you.